and making that feel like they're rushing out of those areas. And then something extra to update the AI, the Berserker. They tend to get lost if it's not a flat plane. So I have a slight inclined plane from one section of the map. The back side of the map is inclined, and the front section of the map is on a lower plane. So they tend to, even though the navigation points are connected, I'm not particularly sure how the Berserkers go about traversing that grid when they want to traversing that graph when they want to acquire the player. But something to assist them a little is I set up basically a sequence where they would randomly, every so often, depending on the difficulty, find their way to the player. And that is handled while the Berserker is alive. And then, of course, I check if the Berserker is dead. And if they're dead, then update the appropriate counters to make sure that we're not spawning more Berserkers than we need to. And then I had set up some conditions here so that if we kill more than one Berserker at one time, since I'm specifically handling the reference to each one of these Berserkers, we should handle that appropriately so we spawn the appropriate number. And getting back to the aggro system. So I had set up something called the focus for Super RAAM. So this is General RAAM in Phase 2. And basically, this is a very simple aggro system based on how much damage Marcus or Dom has done. So I every single time that Super RAAM is damaged, I check who damaged him and appropriately increment their damage counter. So there's a damage counter for Marcus, a damage counter for Dom. And when if Dom is not a human player, then the focus will always go to Marcus. But if Dom is a human player, then every 500 hit points that RAAM loses, we'll go ahead and check who should have aggro. So it's kind of hard determining what is a good value for how often you want to check you want the boss to have aggro. I definitely didn't want to check that every single point. That would seem a little bit insane, and then you would have situations where if the damage is being toggled too quickly between two players, then the fake AI that I would have implemented might have gotten confused. So I thought 500 damage would be an appropriate number. And I'll use this focus not only for spawning the appropriate Berserkers in the right area, but I also use this for making RAAM face the appropriate direction and spawn Kryll in the appropriate area. So that gets to the next point, handling Super RAAM's movement and the summoning of Kryll. So his movement is this kind of network here. His movement is determined basically by which side the focus is on. So whoever has aggro, he has to face that person. And then he walks back and forth between 3 points. And then he randomly chooses how much he's going to walk. So if he's on the far left, he either walk to the center or to the right. If he's in the middle, he walks to the left or right. If he walks to the right, he moves to the center or the left. And then to make it a little bit more interesting, I set up random facial animations for him so that he would say different things, just like RAAM does in the regular Gears of War. So something just to make him feel a little bit more dynamic, make him feel a little more alive. And then randomly, he will sometimes sit there and wait at his spot, just to break things up a little bit. So after he moves, he can decide to summon some Kryll, and you can see here is probably the bulk of the scripting. It's handled in summoning the different Kryll, and I keep track of, in conjunction with which side the focus is on. So which side someone has aggro, I have triggers keeping track of where they are relatively, a relative location of where they are on that side. And when we come to summoning things, or summoning the Kryll, depending on how much he's been damaged. So he can be damaged up to 3 times and then he dies. So if he hasn't been damaged at all, he will summon Kryll 30% of the time. If he's damaged once, 60% of the time. If he's damaged twice, he'll be summoning Kryll every single chance he gets. So there'll be different waves that he will summon. and I've set up something to control how many waves, how many kamikaze waves, how many normal waves. So we have two different types of waves, a kamikaze wave and a normal wave. A normal wave basically travels in a circle around the map, and a kamikaze wave will travel in this kind of curve, either into the sky and smashing into the ground, or a short distance into the sky and smashing into a wall. And you can see here I have something for managing all the different flocks of Kryll to make it seem a little bit more fluid. And the reason why I have so many so many sequences here is because the sequences don't work like a function. You can use them in some way like a function in traditional programming languages, but it's not an instance-based system. So if I call something once and I call it again like a second later, it will basically cut off the first call and then start the second call. You won't have two instances on the stack. And with that kind of limitation, you have to do a lot of copying and pasting and then changing the appropriate variables for the movement of the Kryll. So I go ahead and spawn a flock. I check for while that flock is alive if it could damage the player or the Berserkers, and then making it move along a predefined path. And I do that for many flocks for the waves and many flocks for the kamikaze Kryll. And that basically sums up his movement and his summons. And once he is hurt 3 times, so in this section here I handle the damage that he takes, the different thresholds. So I have 4,000 damage for Wisp mode, 6,000 damage for average, and 8,000 damage for batshit insane. And after he's damaged each time, he'll get hurt. He'll stop moving, stop summoning Kryll, and then he'll play his hurt animations and then start that again. And depending on the difficulty, he'll spawn some boomers. And if he's about to die, he'll go ahead and play his death animation. I have a short little cinematic for that. We'll kill... Let me go back to this. So I have a little cinematic for that. And we'll go ahead and kill the remaining enemies, just so the player doesn't feel robbed when they kill RAAM, that everything else is dead and they don't have a chance of being killed by something at the very end. And then we will play the victory cinematic and update the objective that the player has killed Super RAAM. And we play this victory cinematic, and then I play a short Gears of War movie. This is basically a truncated version of the final cinematic for Gears of War, and I end the game. So that is a basic overview of the scripting I've done in Death from Above. As you can see, it's fairly complicated. There are a lot of different modules, but I think I did a good job of layering those modules together and making it fairly easy to read, and also providing good access to tweak different variables appropriately to make the experience more balanced and more fun. Thank you for watching.